Law of rhythm. For me, law of rhythm is a lot like law of vibration, which is the movement that comes from us, our thoughts, our actions, our feelings, the law of vibration. And it's also a mixture of the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, which we talked about last week. Okay? Perpetual transmutation of energy means that we can change the energy in our lives at any time. If something negative is happening, we can change that negative just by changing our thought patterns. Now, the law of rhythm is that change permanent. So let's say, I'll explain it deeper. Let's say we're experiencing a lot of negative in our life. And we notice that there's a lot of negative in our life. So then we start thinking, okay, you know what? I need to change my life. Once we make that change, we have changed the rhythm in our life. During that change, we are still changing. In the process of change, we are doing the transmutation of energy. We're just transmuting it still. We're still manipulating it. So there's we might notice some good changes, and then all of a sudden we're knocked back on our butt again. And we're like, why did this happen out of the blue? You know, that kind of stuff will happen. But once we are in the rhythm of the law, we will start to notice that we will naturally attract things to us automatically. Okay, so the law of rhythm is us being within the change. The change has already happened, and we are moving within positivity. I'll give you guys an example, okay, of the law of rhythm. Let me see here. This is a true story. Okay, so the law of rhythm. This guy works with, okay, so there's a spiritual guy. And now, when we're in the law of rhythm, it doesn't mean bad things are going to stop happening, so-called bad. It doesn't mean challenges are going to go away at all. Challenges will still happen in our life. So there's a spiritual man, very, very busy, has great faith in God, and he goes to take his car in for an oil change. And when he's there, the mechanic is looking at his oil, and the mechanic looks to the car real quickly and notices that the brakes are low. And he says to the guy, your brakes are like real low. They could go at any time. The guy says, well, you know, I better have my faith in God because I don't have any time to fix my car right now, at all. The mechanic says, well, try to bring it in as soon as you have time because really you're riding on just nothing there. No, I don't even know what's stopping you. And the guy said, well, I've been pumping my brakes and that helps me slow down. And have you guys ever had brakes that are going and you have to pump them and everything? You know, never? Well, I have done that before. My brakes did give out on me before, so I do know this situation. And so if you pump them, it makes the car jerk, but the car doesn't stop. That's what this guy was doing, okay? His wife told me this story. And so what happened was, he's busy, he's going to a business meeting, he's going downhill, and he's gathering up speed. And he realizes, okay, you know what, I better, you know, stop my speed a little bit. So he goes to stop his speed, no brakes at all going down this hill. There's a house at the end of the hill, and which he would have to make a sharp turn anyway. So he starts, you know, he realizes if he can't make that sharp turn, he's going to smash into that house. There's a tree right there, and he decides to smash into the tree. I got goosebumps just thinking about it because of the story. Like, so anyway, he smashes into the tree. Hi, come in. When he smashes into the tree, he obviously is out completely. So they had to come and get him, and you know how they call that rescue service? The Jaws of Life. The Jaws of Life had to get him out of the car. He went to the hospital, and his wife was like, wow, she says to the doctor, it's so unfortunate that he did, and he drove his car like that. Now he's paralyzed the rest of his life. No use of his legs now for the rest of his life. And she said, it was so unfortunate. I guess his faith didn't save him. And the doctor said, yes, his faith did save him, because God made sure there was a tree there. And God made sure that his life was not over, but he can still enjoy his life. And not only that, if he had smashed into the house down the hill, he would have killed a family of 5. So God was there the whole entire time. Now, because this man was working with the law of rhythm, and he was working with the law of the first law that is called the divine oneness, which I'm going to explain again, he was working in accordance with God's ways, God's walk, God's word. Therefore, he was saved. He could have died, that whole family could have died, and that would have been a greater, I think, a real distress on even the wife. Go ahead.
But I can't remember which law, but I remember sometimes he mentioned it. But he was told also to get his breaks done.
Yes.
And he ignored it.
Right.
Right. So that also brings, it was one of the laws you said.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect.
Good.
That's nice. Right? So technically.
Cause and effect.
Yeah,
that is cause and effect.
Stuff, but he also had the cause and effect.
But God saved him.
Right.
He caused that.
Right.
He affected that whole entire thing because of what he caused. You're definitely 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
But you see how the laws intertwine? It's like a whole web, right? So he was working with the law of rhythm, but went out of it because of the cause and effect.
Right.
But God kept him in the rhythm because of the divine oneness, being one with God and believing in God. I mean, there are no laws. Unless we have the law of the divine oneness with God and with God to our understanding, then we might as well not even consider attracting good to us. Those laws don't work. We have to realize that God is the #1 law. So that is basically, when I heard that story, I was like, wow, that is incredible how every day God does that. I learn how divorces will happen. Relationships will break apart. People will get their hot water turned off. People will get their hot water turned off. This is what will happen, but there are challenges that will make us stronger. And untested faith is unreliable faith. We can go around and say, oh, we have all the faith in the world. I love God. I have all kinds of faith. And God says, okay, well, here, I'm going to prove it to you now. I'm going to prove to me how much faith you have. And it's through that challenge that you're not only proving to God that you are strong, but you're proving to him that you love him enough to stay with him. Right? And not only that, when some people go through challenges, not to center you out here, but when you went through your challenge, you drew nearer to God. Some people draw away from God. They turn away, like, God, why would you let this happen to me? Why would you do this to me, God? I served you all these years. I've been with you all these years. Went to church, gave my 10%, my tithes and offering, even taught Sunday school, fed the homeless, and this is what you put me through? God, I have no time for you. That's what some people will say. But then you got some people, like yourself in your recent challenge, boom, writing poems about Jesus. You see that? So she wrote a poem about Jesus. And the poem, I cried when I saw it. I was like, whoa, this is a serious poem. This is one that needs to be in every church bulletin. But seriously, and as a writer too myself, I'm like, wow, I wish I wrote that. Like, seriously, that's how nice it was. That needs to be in the beginning of a book. So it's a beautiful poem. It should be, and that, I honestly do believe that it should be in almost every church bulletin near every single special time. Easter, Christmas. Okay, so here's another example of changing, of rhythm, but changing rhythm. There's a woman. She was always dating abusive men. Abusive men, and sometimes they weren't physically abusive. Sometimes they were verbally abusive. Sometimes they were emotionally abusive. And so she realized that, she kept asking, why do I keep drawing these guys? I keep drawing in these dudes that are abusive. And she realized it was her own energy that was doing it. So it wasn't the men, really, it was the guys she was drawing in. Her energy, her law of rhythm, the rhythm she was stuck in, she was putting it out, and these guys were coming. And that's what the universe was sending to her, because that's what she was working towards all that time. So all of a sudden, she realized that she needs to make a change. And that change was the law of vibration, putting different thoughts out to the universe and saying, universe, I need to change. And then she implemented the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, and she started to change her energy. In the midst of changing her energy, the universe was still bringing her crappy men, abusive men. But what happened was she sent them back, and no matter how much she liked them. And she said to me, Cerise, they were getting better looking and better looking. And their jobs were awesome. Their cars that they were having was just great. She said, but I knew that being in the midst of that change, I still wasn't changed enough to draw the man I was looking for, no matter what car he drove. It had to be his personality that had to be different. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So then what happened, she said, right when she started to feel that change, after 8 months, she started to feel that change. one guy came up to her and he's like, hey, how you doing? You look so nice, blah, blah, blah. Here, take my business card. And she took his business card and she said she felt like calling him and gave it back to him and said, no, thank you. And he said, what's your problem? You're so stush. You think you're all that? And then she realized that, wait a minute, by giving it back to him, it was an indication that this garbage still isn't cleared up from her life. So then what she started to do was just do a lot more mental exercises, a lot more meditation. She wrote a wish list down, which we're going to do next week. I didn't get to do it yet. We're going to write a wish list down, which we did a few months ago. Do you remember the wish list? We're going to do that again. And so she wrote a wish list down about what she wants, how she wants her man to behave, what compliments she would like. And she didn't write down his job or how he looks or anything of that nature because she just assumed that God knows what her taste is. So that's what she said. She said, God, you know what I want. But just to be more specific, this is what I desire in the man. So she did that, and then so she pumped it up a little bit. And all of a sudden, she's walking down the street one day again, and this guy is in his car, and he looked like something was hanging out his car, I guess, a jacket, I don't remember what she said. Could have been in his laptop bag or something. Something was hanging out his car. And she said, excuse me, sir, something's hanging out your door. And he was like, oh, thank you very much. And he couldn't get the door open, and he was in the driver's seat, and it was in the passenger seat that this was happening. So she was like, do you want me to open the door for you? And he was like, yeah. And she noticed he was kind of nervous, so she was making an impression on him, and he didn't know what to do. And then so he unlocks the door, and he's like, oh, sorry, oh my God, by the way, my name is, and then he introduced himself. And she was like, oh, my name is, and she told her name. And then he was like, well, I'd like to get a hold of you sometime. Thank you for that. Oh, you just thanked her, buddy. You know? But he tried, right? And she realized the pickup line, and he wasn't too forward, and he was totally different than what she was used to. And she said she was going to say no to him, but then she realized that was her opportunity. That's the point where she transmuted all her energies.